And do you believe God can prepare a table in the wilderness? And he asked that question to them because they came to a place of this is not my message, but I'm gonna just roll on with it into my message because I want to do some teaching today or some just dive into what we're dealing with. So we've been talking about uncaging our faith, and in uncaging our faith, a lot of times we bottled up ourselves in a box that's safe. And the box is safe, and outside of the box, I'm a little afraid or fearful. So I find myself just stuck in this place of playing. I'm not all the way in the back, but I'm not willing to come all the way to the front. You ever go? You come into a room of people, and I'm not talking about y'all, but this situation that recently happened. You come into a room of people, and where do everybody gravitate to? We usually gravitate toward the back, right? So not my folks in the back, y'all, that's y'all seat. We ain't talking about that. Well, we do that to say if you have to go into a place, a doctor's office, or you're gonna sit. So if they got a group of people right here, and you got empty seats over here, and just say they got 2 seats right here, 3 people sitting there, and then they got 4 seats over here, where we gonna normally sit at? Where the 4 empty seats are. So you come into a room, usually you're going to go all the way to the back, or you're going to move, and nobody going to sit in the front. So something I started doing to get myself out of that, I purposely sit in the front, just to get over the fear of being afraid of sitting in the front. What if they call on me? Well, they're just going to have to call on me. And that recently happened. I sit in the front, and I'm the first person they call on. And because I forced myself to do it so much over the years, it didn't even bother me anymore. So that tells me that there's certain things that have caged us up that we can actually get over, and it won't affect your life anymore. And now watch, when you're the first person to speak up, everybody follows suit on your speaking. So now you don't become the follower, but you become the leader because you started it all. I mean, I've been in this setting for a long time. You ask a question and nobody gonna answer. Why? Scared of being wrong, or what they gonna say when I answer? And then don't you always have that person that you ever had to go into a group, and then they say, well, let's use Sunday school or vacation Bible school. When you used to go to vacation Bible school, and they say, okay, somebody got to get in front of the room and speak and tell us what you learned for the day. What used to go through y'all? Wasn't there always that one person in the group that everybody recommends? Hey, look, you perfect for this. Why don't you go? Now, a lot of times I was the shy person in the room, but why was I always one of the ones chosen to go, hey, you go share it? I don't know why that was. I always picked somebody else to go share what they was going to say about it. So I'm saying that to say we have certain patterns that we are been conditioned over the years. Tell me this. Sometimes, didn't you have the right answer? When the answer was blurted out, you had the right answer, right? But was afraid to give that answer because what if the answer was wrong? Deep down inside that answer wasn't wrong. But there is a barrier. There is something hindering because maybe down the line somewhere we may have gotten picked on because we gave the wrong answer, or we saw someone get picked on because they gave the right answer. Y'all know how foolish we was as kids growing up. You gave the right, you just a teacher's pet, you a nerd, you this and you that, you other. And sometimes that could affect a person. And when I looked at the children of Israel, you can see over the years how life affected them that brought them to the place where they were when they began to be in unbelief with God. And I'm sensitive through the study of realizing, so we know that God gave Abraham a covenant. In Genesis, the 12th chapter, and I think in verse 15, he says, I'm going to give your inheritance, your people, this land, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. And at 400 years, I'm going to come and give them that land. So, and when we get into Exodus, the children of Israel are now in that 400-year period where Joseph was king. Joseph, not say Joseph was king, but Joseph was ruler in Egypt. We know the story of Joseph. God brought him there to bring him through a period of famine. And through that famine period, he had strategy from God to get them through that. And now there's peace in the land, there's joy, everything is going smooth, but Joseph dies and a new king arises that didn't know Joseph. But he had her own agenda out. And then now Israel is progressing more than the people of the land that the king, than the king's people. And the king says, let's put some pressure on them so that they don't grow and be more than us and give their services to our enemies and overtake us. So he put taskmasters over them to put the pressure on them. But they find themselves now in rigorous living through the taskmasters. And what happened, they got to a place to where they felt their lives were bitter because of the rigor that they were under. And what was interesting to me is they got to a place to where they felt their lives were bitter. Have you ever gotten to a place to where you felt your life was like, this ain't the cards that I got out of the deck? You ever played spades or you ever played cards and you got the cards in which you could put them back? Uno or something like that. You got all of these cards and can we start over? You didn't shuffle right. Let's get the card. So you know, you hear phrases like when you're giving lemons, make lemonade. You ever heard that saying? Or whatever cards is dealt to you, you have to play with those cards. So does that make it easy? Does that make it fair? Does that make the situation any better? No. So there's obstacles, circumstances, situations that come at us that we have to work through. So my sensitivity to them going through that is what was happening to them at this time. So what we have to see is what was happening to them now is what's going to affect how they see things later. What is happening to them now is going to affect how they're seeing things later. So now they come to a place where they cried out to God to deliver them from what was happening. And we know God sent Moses at the time to go and deliver the people from out of Egypt. So now let's fast forward to them being delivered out. God brought them out with a mighty hand. They saw so many moves of God. We don't have time to go into all of those, but we know the plagues, we know the frogs, the lotus, all of these things that happened to get Pharaoh to a place of letting them go. The last thing that happened, all the firstborn in Egypt was killed. And when that happened, he know he's killing off my bloodline. So I better let these folks go. So they leave now 3 days journey to go into the wilderness. But before they went to cross the Red Sea, they were in a wilderness period to get to the Red Sea. So now just think of this. You've been suppressed by this group for 400 years. God comes and sends a deliverer and deliver you. And then now you're in the wilderness to go across the Red Sea. So there's a body of water in front of you. If here, just think of it this way. You on the causeway, Lake Pontchartrain, right? Y'all know that if somebody block off the front of the bridge so now think about, since we got a good picture of it, you are running from the enemy that is out to get you, and you're on the causeway, and they're behind you, and you can't go forward. The bridge is out ahead of you, and they are behind you. They have oppressed you all of this time. You're running. You've been under attack all of this time. God delivers you out of the attack for the attack to follow you, and you don't have no way out. So, and sometimes we have to put these scriptures in proper context, because a lot of times I get on the children of Israel, but then I ask myself, what would I have done in that situation? I probably would have been complaining the same way they was complaining. Moses, why did you bring us here to kill us in this wilderness? And Moses' response to them is, stay still and see the salvation of the Lord, because the Lord is going to fight our battles. Now, they're fresh off of God delivering them out of Egypt by the mighty works that he did. But they're just in the wilderness right after this. So I understand that God delivered me, but now how are we going to get out of this one? Because the sea is right in front of us, and the enemy is on chariots and horses. I mean, the Pharaoh sent all of his troops that he had, I think about 600 of them, after them to look. I know we said we're going to let them go, but really we don't want to let them go, because we need them to build the cities that they have been building. And so now they find themselves stuck, and then God parts the Red Sea for them. So while I'm putting it in context for us to see where they were brought through a wilderness to go to another wilderness before they went to the promised land. And God said he brought them around that way so they won't go the way of those that were in the land and find themselves in war. But what he didn't, I know what I said, what God didn't realize, but what was going to begin to happen to them is, not only I'm detouring them around the war on the outside, but at the same time, there's a war on the inside that is brewing. And what I want to deal with in the series that we're dealing with is not necessarily the war that's going on. We got our kids here. I must be getting big again. I bent over like the past hour. Not necessarily just dealing with what's going on the outside. So why put that in context like that? Think of your age and think of all the stuff that you've been through and all the stuff that you continue to go through. And something, see, you would say I would have lost my mind if I didn't see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I know I would have been took out years ago if I wouldn't have trusted in the Lord. Sometimes I didn't even trust in the Lord, and he brought me through situations because time just brought me to this place. A lot of times I would say this, you know, if you just stay alive long enough, you're going to come out of it. Now, you may not come out of it in a favorable way, but through time, you're going to come out of it. God saw them at this time, and then now the Red Sea parts, and they go through the sea on dry ground. So just think about that. We in the boat on the lake, and the water just part ways, just like the bridge. And you walk across there on dry ground. And then the enemy behind you are coming and pursuing you, and God closes the water up on them, and they begin to, they drown. And not only do they drown, but he allowed them to see them on the shore drown. And they sang a song once they came out on the other side of that, praising God and giving God glory. He's establishing something in them, but they didn't take what he was establishing with them to the next place that they were going. What's the point that you're making? The point is, we have to remember what he brought us through, because what he brought you through is what's going to get you through the next season. And if we forget what happened in the last season, then we find ourselves going through it again, not realizing that it's the same God that brought us through the Red Sea that's going to bring us through the wilderness, that's going to bring us to the promised land. Because his promise was for us to get to the promised land. But somewhere, something happened that their past hung them up and had them stuck in the wilderness. And so now, the sea has closed in. He has delivered them from Pharaoh, but now they're stuck. Now, watch this. He didn't leave them empty. They left with substance from Egypt. So they had jewelry, they had gold, they had silver, they had cattle, they had enough to start over in the place that they were bringing them to. So God was saying, I know they're going to need resources, so I'm not leaving them empty. I'm giving them, they're taking the enemy's resources to begin to build from in the place that I'm bringing them to. And something else that I thought about, they were doing the Passover, and he said, don't eat the bread unleavened because you don't know when you're going to have to take off and be out of here. So they took with them the bread, but I believe that was the bread that got them through the wilderness before the Red Sea. Because if you remember in reading the passages, he said, let my people go that they may go 3 days journey into the wilderness to worship. Well, we know when they worshiped, they had to have sacrifice. They had unleavened bread for that worship. So they may have, not in the scripture, but just thinking of it, they may have exhausted their resources there, and then God delivered them through the Red Sea to get to the other side. So now, after they sang their song, after they shouted, after they praised, now they're another 3 days journey into the wilderness, but now we don't have nothing to drink, and we don't have nothing to eat. And so this is where the passage comes. Do you believe that God can prepare a table before you in the wilderness? And so now he's bringing them to a place to see their faith out in action, but they're still in a place of the bondage that he was bringing them out of. So even though God delivered them from the cage of Egypt, the problem now that they have is delivering them from the cage of themselves. And as we talked about, the battle that's within our minds. And so let's put it in perspective this way. If you've been through a hurricane and a hurricane is coming, is it your insight a little different on it's coming now? I would say one of the first things that you would think of when a new hurricane is coming after you done survived the old one is losing everything again. What if we lose everything again? And then some people are going to think it from the standpoint, we lost everything then, this ain't nothing, we'll get it back again. If I lost it before, he'll do it for me again. So that's the mindset that is happening, that is being attacked through the situation. And what the passage unveiled is, the children didn't believe God until God delivered them. But how does faith work? Faith works that you got to believe that he's going to deliver you before you deliver. And so now I can see where their mind was caged to is, all of this that we've been through that brought me to a bitter place, it's now a lot harder for me to believe that God would do it. So God had to show himself faithful to them, but yet still showing themselves faithful to them, they still wasn't able to believe until he done it for them. And so now that he delivered them through the Red Sea and come to a 3 days journey in the wilderness, now they find themselves with no food and with nothing to drink at this point. And then now, how is he going to provide us something to drink in the wilderness? We done came we 3 days from the Red Sea, and there's no water ahead of us. So now what? So when we think of that, now we have to put into perspective: is my faith caged in by what has transpired in the past or what has taken place in the past? And sometimes it's hard to come out of that stuck place because we don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm in the wilderness. There's no water in the wilderness. There's no food in the wilderness. There's nothing available to me but trusting God. That is the place where we come to, where when we master that place, life becomes easy for us. But that's the hardest place to master because, when everything is stripped from you and all you have is belief in God, what else is there to do? It's to trust him, right? So through circumstances, through trial, through various things, remember David. David's in a situation where he killed Goliath and delivered them from the Philistine. And now he finds himself, I'm doing the work of God, and now the man of God is chasing after me. a javelin being thrown at him, spears being thrown at him. He's running and he finds himself living in cages, sometimes from cave to cave. So I just took the cave and made it a cage. And what do you think is going through his mind as he's in these cages? Have you really ever focused in on the, I'm telling y'all, this was so powerful to me. I told y'all about the rock. I don't know what God doing to me. The rock was my first deliverance. Now the cage is, guess, my second deliverance. I just said, I've been in here just looking through this cage like, but guess what? The cage is limiting me from being effective to the speaking of those that are out about. Can I really reach who need to be reached if I'm still caved in? David found himself in caves, pleading. If you look at the Psalms, a lot of the Psalms are songs that David was singing or wrote through what he was dealing with and what he was going through. So let's look at the Psalms for this lesson for today. I think it's Psalms 145, and look what, remember, David is in, just look at him from the standpoint of being in the cave. He's running from his enemies. He's running from the things that he's dealing with. But look what he says. I cried unto thee, O Lord. I said, you are my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. So out here when he was killing Goliath, who was his refuge? It was God, right? Who did he say delivered him from the bear? Who did he say delivered him from the lion? And if he delivered me from the bear and he delivered me from the lion, then surely he can deliver me from this uncircumcised Philistine. Because God was his refuge here. But then when we get here, is God still my refuge? Yes. But where the mental block comes is, if I'm in the cave, God must not be with me, or he must not be still at work. So this is what David is crying out, because if I cried out to you in the wilderness, and I cried out to you in battle, and I cried out to you in victory, then I must cry out to you in the cage. And he says, I'm crying unto the Lord, thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. The next verse. Attend unto my cry, for I am brought very low. This is King David that we're talking about. This is the one that danced in the streets. This is the king that we're talking about that was after God's own heart. He says, for I am brought very low. I think of the children of Israel of being at a low point because of the oppression. He says, deliver me from my persecutors, and for they are stronger than I. Yet, do we see his mindset through this? The next verse. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may praise thy name. The righteous shall compass me about, for thou, the screen went out, man. For, where we at? For thou shalt deal bountifully with me. So what I want to talk about for the rest of the time together is, what David is doing is what we all have to do, is deal with the cages that we are dealing with. And in dealing with the cages, see, David knew, it's so visibly good to see this because David is in the cave. A lot of times we are caged in and not even realizing it. We'll go through life. See, the reason I use the children of Israel story is because of so long of being oppressed and depressed, they found themselves, they thought that's just how life is going to be, when God was trying to bring them to I'm bringing you to a land that's flowing with milk and honey. And the enemy will have us to a place to believe that, I know I want to go to this place that flows with milk and honey, but I don't believe I can make it there. So he attacks the mind, he attacks circumstances, he attacks situations to get us to develop cages, and then God will come in and have us to deal with those cages that we have developed. So watch this. Let's first kind of define what we're talking about when we talk about cages. These are constraints. You're limited, right? Remember the last week's definition. I'm limited by my surroundings, right? I can go back and forward, but that's the furthest I can go. But what's on the outside? See, in here, it gets familiar. So even though I'm limited, I'm still comfortable. Why? Because I have made it my comfort. I'm gonna get in trouble for using it, sister. But it just, not that that's a cage for her, but just something that I think of. I don't know how she do it, but she do it. She got everything available to her in one space. How much you got to come out for, sister? You ain't got to come out for much if you don't want to, huh? Some of the stuff that she got available to her, I'm like, how in the world she got it in there? But what is it? Is it a comfort, right? That I don't have to get up and go. I don't have to move for it because I have it available to me. Now, I'm using that as an example, but that's the example of most of our lives, that even though I may not like where I am, not that saying that she don't like where she is, but just using an example of what's to be available to you in your comfort. We'll make the wilderness comfortable because we don't want to go to the promised land. Because what's in the promised land? Giants. What's in the promised land? Battles. See, God ain't bringing them to a place to where he's not still going to have to fight for them, where the enemy's still not going to attack them, but he's bringing them to a place to where they have the upper hand on the enemy and the enemy don't have the upper hand on them. But where we limit God is, God can't have the upper hand for us if we're going to stay in the cage. So the cage is constraints we have developed over time due to life's happenings or life circumstances that have confined us, have limited us, and have restrained us from living the fullness God has prepared for us. It's a constraint. It's a limit. If you see birds in cages, we talked about the lion last week. If you see that a bird is caged, he's flying, but can he really fly? He only can fly from side to side. It's not what he's normally capable of being and doing. The other illustration I'll give us is think of an aquarium. Now, in the aquarium, you put the fish in the aquarium, but you can fix it where it looks like there's a reef in there, and there's rocks, and it looks just like the ocean. But guess what? It's not. No matter how much you dress up the aquarium, it's for your vision, but not the life that the fish was supposed to live. I don't need y'all to go everybody going off trying to free the fish, because I don't know why they talk about Nemo, come on. But is that really the natural habitat of the fish? So my question to us is, are cages our natural habitat? In Genesis, the first chapter, verse 26, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. What does the word say? To let them have dominion, right? So what is, if we can go to a general consensus of what we were created for, Genesis 1:26 give us what mankind, male and female, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, subdue it. That means we have a responsibility to dominate the sphere of influence that God has made available to us. We have that responsibility. The responsibility is not on anyone else. So watch this. Even if someone else has caused the cage, you still have a responsibility not to live in it. I can use the example of if you didn't have a father in your life, you still have a responsibility to become a father. We cannot use the excuse that, well, my daddy wasn't in my life for you to be a deadbeat. That's not an excuse. We all have, see, one thing that freed me so much was taking ownership. When we take ownership, no matter what has happened to you, you still have a responsibility to take ownership. So the first ownership that I have to take is, I've developed these cages. And if I want to be free from this cage, remember what we said last week, huh? We said God hasn't caged us. It's in not every instance, but from the purpose of the lesson that we're teaching, God hasn't caged us. We have caged ourselves, and at any time can let ourselves out. God hasn't caged us. We have, in some instances, caged ourselves, and at any time can let ourselves out. At any time. If we've been caged up by friendships, if we've been caged up by relationships, if we've been caged up by jobs, if you've been caged up, anything you can, anytime can you let yourself go from a situation that you're in? Can you let yourself go? Have you ever had to let some people go because they have formulated a cage? So have you ever had to walk away from situations that could have formulated a cage? That's some of the hardest things to do in life, because you know this situation is locking you up. But am I going to stay here? And that's the question that we have to ask ourselves. So a few questions that I wrote down here is, what happens when you realize you are the builder of the cage? What happens when that comes in? You know what? I've developed this. If you let someone continue to call you out of your name, belittle you, degrade you, you have developed that cage. And you at any time can not allow that to happen. Am I right? And I know what we would say, because I would probably make the same statement, but you don't know what they've done to me. But you don't have to live there. You don't know the disadvantages that I have, but you don't have to live there. Come on, I know this is a tough situation sometimes and a tough topic to talk of, but especially in cultures, yes, things have been created in cultures to block you, but you don't have to live there. We don't have to, see, the problem is, when you begin to put an address on your cage and start calling it home, then you've just canceled yourself for being delivered from the situation that God is calling you to. When fear, when doubt, and we're going to talk about unbelief next week, but when this becomes home, you know what happens when this becomes home? Then now I'm no longer free to live. I'm a caged victim. And I want everybody to see my cage, because this is what has happened to me in life. And God is trying to tell us we can come out of this situation, but we saying, but God, you don't know what happened to me. God, you don't know what. So let's look at. Let's ask this next question. We're running out of time. The next question was, what's keeping you caged? And the third question is, have you ever asked yourself, how did I get here? I'm telling y'all, this has been so therapeutic for me. Have you ever asked yourself, how did I get here? I'll give y'all one insight into my life. How I got here is from not leaving fast enough in the past. And so you allow it to develop and you allow it to build and you allow it, the mountain, the molehill to become a mountain. And then guess what? You find yourself stuck. And then now when you're here reflecting, you say, I should have left a long time ago. But what happens is, not only do the cage of your past, but the cage of fear happens. And now, if I leave, what's going to be out there? I'm leaving. This is so crazy what we deal with. I'm dealing with familiar foolishness, but I'm afraid to leave for unknown favor. I may be getting knocked upside the head here, but at least I know what I got. If I leave, I don't know what I'm going to get here. I don't know what the situation is. And so the question arises again, do you believe that God can prepare a table before you in the wilderness? Now I'm just using this. If God delivered you from this fool that was abusing you, do you believe that God can prepare a righteous person for you? The problem sometimes with us is, even though we'll leave abuse still don't leave us. And we find ourselves, I want something new, but I'm still looking for a new situation, and I find myself in that same abuse. You know why? Because you left the situation, but the abuse didn't leave you. And then a lot of times what we'll do is, we'll count against the new situation for the old situation that happened to us. And now I can't live in the freedom that God is calling me to because I'm going into a free situation with bondage. We do it all the time. I've been in business relationships that haven't worked, and then now you go into a new business situation and you're thinking of the old situation that ain't gonna work because this didn't work in this situation. This is a whole different situation. But because we develop these cages from our past that we can't get through, we find ourselves stuck. And asking the question, how did I get here? The good news is, you can leave at any time. If you deal with anger, if you deal with, look, some of us deal with church hurt, and with hurt, period. The hurt becomes wounds. Those wounds start out enough for band-aids, but next thing you know, they're open wounds. And if truth be told, we all be walking around with vacuum packs on us because the wound done got so big, I better cover it up or it's going to get infected. And what I'm learning about some cages, some of those cages are contagious. You know, one of them that the children of Israel developed was complaining and murmuring. Now I think those are, they're similar situations, but they went to complaining because in just 3 days journey, just 3 days from being delivered out of the Red Sea situation, 3 days journey and they already complaining. You brought us in this wilderness to die with no food. I'm somewhat empathetic to them because I can understand where they coming from. Because he's developing their faith, but they're at a place to where I'm not there yet. So that's the great part about God is he's not telling us that we have to be there. We just, how does it say? You have faith as a grain of a mustard seed. And you can say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and it will be done. And whatever you say, it will be done. That's a place that we have to grow to. But what the good news that God is trying to give us is, it's just a grain of a mustard. The mustard seed is a small, small seed, but what it grows into. So when we start somewhere, but we first have to start saying, I'm not going to live here. I'm going to leave here. Even whatever it is, if it's bitterness, if it's low self-esteem, if it's insecurity, if it's something that happened to you in the past, we'll deal with the cages next week. Because what first one we have to deal with in order for our faith to be uncaged, we got to deal with unbelief. And I'm not going to use this for no example because it's not a one way all, because doctors are useful. But sometimes we put so much emphasis on what the doctor said as opposed to what God said. All I'm saying is never put what God said under what the doctor said, no matter what it is. If the doctor said, you coming out of this, I don't care what the doctor said. I mean, if God said you coming out of this, I don't care what the doctor said. It's hard to understand that situation until you have experienced it. And sometimes I've heard God say, this is the end. And guess what it was? The end. Some situation where I believe that God, this is not the end, and it was the end. I still have to trust God. I'm not going to put my trust in God, something else over my trust in God bringing me through or God working in the situation. But you have to deal with the unbelief. Why could he not do many miracles in the place that he was in? He said, because of their unbelief. Why could not they cast out that demonic spirit from the child? The disciples couldn't do it. He said, because of your unbelief. There's a situation where he said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. The children of Israel, the same story that we talked about, they didn't begin to mix faith with the word that they heard. And because of doing so, they were not able to enter into the promised land. Why wasn't they able to enter into the promised land? The scripture said, because of unbelief. So I asked myself the question, as I ask you today, where am I caged in with unbelief? In some areas we can believe, in some areas we can't believe. Some things are not as hard for us, and some things are harder for us. But we just have to come to a place to where we say, hey God, I don't want to live here. I know what your word says. Your word says I'm the head and not the tail. I'm above only and not beneath. The blessing of the Lord, it make it rich and add no sorrow. If I'm walking in sorrow, one of our cages is lack. But if God speaks to us, this is what you, I don't know about that, God. That's out of the norm. I don't know if I could do that. Then we'll be like Moses. We'll go on this. Look what God tells Moses to go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord had not appeared unto thee. Why do we think this was his response? This was his response because before he tried to deliver them, he killed the Egyptian because the Egyptian was messing with Israel. Then Israel is fighting amongst each other. The children were fighting amongst each other. And he said, what y'all doing? Y'all brothers. And then he said, who made you ruler over us? And Moses took off into the wilderness. Fight or flight, right? He ran into the wilderness, and now God met him there. 40 years he's in the wilderness. And God appears to him in a burning bush and said, I'm bringing you to deliver my people. What I realize is God put it in his heart before to deliver the people, but it was in the time. But he didn't met this himself, but that wasn't the way that God would have him to do it. So he had to go back into the wilderness and learn some things, but then God, for the appropriate time, man. So that's why I'm saying seasons. But what happened is a season in his life, he brought it into the next season. Look at the next verse. Not the next verse, go to 4 and 10. Moses said to the Lord, I'm not eloquent, neither therefore nor since thou hast spoken unto your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Now, There's scripture that says Moses was raised by an Egyptian mother. But his mother took care of him for the Egyptian mother. Y'all know the story. So he was trained in Egyptian knowledge or their knowledge. He was very eloquent. But somewhere down the line, he lost faith in himself because of a mistake. This is a cage. Moses found himself caged in by that. But look what God tells him. Verse 11. The Lord said unto him, who made your mouth? Who make the dumb or the deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not the Lord. And that's not saying that God made them deaf, blind, or dumb. He's just saying he made the person. Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall do or say. So what Moses called a limit, God didn't call it a limit. What Moses saw as a limit, God saw as an opportunity. I know what you're capable of. Now I'm going to put you in the right situation for you to see. We can see the same with Gideon. When Gideon, he came to Gideon, he said, Gideon, you are a mighty man of valor. I'm going to send you to deliver the people. Gideon's response is, my family is the poorest family in Manasseh. You might have to use somebody else because we're not. And God didn't even blink at it. He went straight on to say, in this might, I'm going to deliver the people, and you're going to deliver them as one man. And situations happen where God brought them to a place to where, in the story where, they come to the sea, if the soldiers drink water out of their hand or put their mouth to the water, that's who you choose. He end up, out of all of these soldiers, he end up with how many? I forgot this, 300 or something, or 6? 300. I think they reduced it down to 300. To show that it's God that's going to deliver you, not you able to deliver yourself. And we have to come to a place to where we believe that God can prepare a table for us in the wilderness. And I believe that's where the attack is, to see if you're going to give in and give up, or are we going to rise up and take what God has made available to you? That's a scary place to be in. But that is the place where faith gets the victory. And if we get to a place to where we believe before it happens, that's showing that we're growing in the faith that God is preparing us for. But our main fight, and see, we can stand to our feet.